Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host Chris Shang. Today our guest is Gil Santos, and he's a senior data engineer over at Blue Orange Digital. So we bring in different types of thought leaders from different areas of expertise for our listeners to kind of get a good plethora of diverse kind of it is that you guys do there, and what kind of customers do you work with?
I joined Blue Orange a couple of years ago, like 2 years and a half now. And first client that we started work with was a homeowner, um, pretty big real estate and homeowner company, and they're pretty big in terms of apartments that they manage. So started out as IoT data. So we started capturing and analyzing IoT data, and then it became bigger and bigger, and we started doing data warehousing, and we ended up building a CDC pipeline, streaming data live from all the legacy systems that they have inside Snowflake, which was a pretty intense and interesting journey for me.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's before we talk into the more technical components of today's conversation, would love to kind of get just understanding about your background. Um, you know, what does it mean to you to be an engineer, a data engineer, IT specialist, some of these titles that you've had in the past. But obviously I think like being more on the technical side and just the interest I think in like, the coding language and then just development in general. Where did that initial interest come from and when did you really start taking it more seriously?
Yeah, so I started out as a developer, just to give a little bit more context. It was around 2005 that I um, inadvertently entered the data field of source, because back in 2005 we were basically migrating from client servers to the intranet, right? So we had all those advances in web 2.0, I think was still on the beginning, right? So and I found that every issue that we had to fix, if it was in legacy systems or pre-existing systems or newly created systems, usually we had to fix in the database. So it started out this way. I had to fix a lot of stuff that the web interface was doing wrong, and they could do that basically by querying it right, by
Mhm.
understanding better the legacy system. So I kind of shaped it kind of shaped my profession as I swiftly migrating more into the data than as a developer that I was. So it became like a day-to-day. In 2005, I joined like audit department for a pretty big insurance company in Brazil, and they had tons of work that you had to do in um, translate from ACL, which is a audit language, into SQL. So we had to do all those kind of work and repeat. And basically, that shaped me into a better data analyst and slash engineer, because we basically back then we had to build queries and repeat the process over the course of the year, and we had to pretty much um, change the way we do joins. Um, uh, we select data from legacy systems. So uh, that was like a game-changing opportunity for me. And when I really became more of a data analyst slash engineer, right?
Got it.
I became more of a data analyst, right? But as time progressed, I started doing more of a data engineer stuff, like partitioning tables, tuning queries, indexes, so forth, and usually with the assistance of the DBAs, but mostly DBAs, they were granted they had the task to support the systems, right? So they laid a hand, but the one that needed to solve the actual issue, if it was a non-performance report, if it was basically a new dashboard, it was me that it was doing that. So that's when all changed. So back in 2005, so it's like almost 20 years now.
Got it. Okay. Cool. And so let's talk about a little bit more of, you mentioned briefly kind of like that transition period from web to web 2.0, and then, we've had conversations in the past 5 years of web 3.0 and all that kind of stuff. And some of it overhyped, some of it real, but walk us through some of the things that you've seen in the past few years of the real, I guess, like the real evolutions, the real changes, around data infrastructure, and how does that impact, um, not maybe just your day to day, but how you think about your career evolving, how has it evolved in the past couple of years, like more recently, and then how do you imagine it evolving, going into the next few years here with a lot of, I think, like, a lot of technical changes, a lot of like technological changes that's happening right now. So just curious as to how you think about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the last 20 years, what I've seen is that the data changed from being completely siloed in solutions that you had to build, that you had to buy an appliance. So the major shift that I see right now is that now you don't have to buy an appliance. Now you can just sign on and spin at the speed of light. Maybe just at the speed of your contract, right? When you sign off, you are able basically to spin off multiple database systems, multiple instances in your account. And of course, you have like a bunch of tools like that makes the job pretty easy, like DBT on the data transformation side. You have Terraform on the infrastructure side. So everything is becoming more easy and manageable. So you have more power and you have more productivity. You can replicate your work across multiple servers, nodes, and clouds. And so that's the major shift that I see from the last few years. I think we're still on the verge of changing those. I feel like not all the companies made that decision yet, from moving from on-premise into the cloud, but it's pretty game changing, and they are doing. But we are not done. I mean, we are on the new gold rush of AI, of course, and but I think we haven't finished the cloud migration yet. I think there's still multiple companies that need to move to the cloud. That one example is the previous company that I worked for, which was a digital bank here in Brazil. And just to give you some context, I'm from Brasilia actually, and I came to São Paulo in 2020 before the lockdown. And when I got here in São Paulo, the day that I stepped into São Paulo, there was a major flood in the Pinheiro River, and their data center got flooded, and they lost one data center for the water, a couple millions. So I think the cloud is wonderful because you don't have to worry with those things, because of course you have some safety net when in terms of geolocation and replication, right? So that's how I sense. I think we're still on the big digital transformation era. I think that is not over, but I think now we have to coexist with the AI gold rush right now.
Got
So
it.
I feel.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's definitely industries, and maybe, I think financial is one of those sectors. I think about insurance, and I think about, logistics companies. There's a lot of big data set companies that have like legacy kind of solutions, and it's just the cycle of like evolving them tends to take a long time. Um, but obviously, as you said too, we have the gold rush of AI, and not only are they going to have to catch up to cloud systems, but then also in addition to that, like take into account in that decision making process the AI computing, right? Like, and how much that's going to require, if that's going to become a part of their offering, or a part of like um how they even just kind of operationally run a business, right? Is that something that that you're seeing right now? Is it a discussion still in terms of how to plan for it, or are you seeing more people starting to implement for that?
Well, from my standpoint, what I see right now is that usually, like you mentioned before, usually it would take time for you to build a system because you
Yeah,
had all this dependency on infrastructure, right? You need the place, you need the power, you need the rack stations, the
yep,
network guys, and now you don't. Now you have all that. You empower the developer so much that the developer can spin off all that in seconds for you, and that is like a no-brainer, right? So when companies start to think about it, I think not every company has had thought about it, but the ones that have, they basically pushing a lot of their system, which old-fashioned or legacy old systems, they will put their systems into the cloud because all of that, all of those benefits, of course. Um, but I think like all the companies that I'm seeing right now is like uh, they have so much integration in the cloud, and it's basically so easy for you to create multiple web servers, scale up and down, vertically, horizontally. So I think they're still far behind on what they can do,
yep,
and I think we haven't reached like 20, not even 20% of the cloud migration potential that
got it,
I think it is out there.
got it. Um, I mean, on the topic of let's talk about the topic of AI though too, right? Like, I think the biggest question around that is also around computing power, right? And also just the sheer ability to power some of these like massive, uh, you know, kind of like the massive like algorithms and MLM, kind of infrastructure and systems. And I think like from a consumer perspective, there's obviously a lot of these like, I think really kind of like major, at least like surface level, seems like very disruptive type of technology that can come out of generative AI, right? But I think that there's also the cost of generative AI and actually creating it, empowering it. And when you think about when you look at that, I mean, from your side of things, how do you feel about the promise of what generative AI can be versus like the realistic ability of powering all those things at scale?
Yeah, I think right now this is the billion-dollar question. How are we gonna actually use AI and make use that makes sense? Because right now it feels like a meme that I saw on the internet. It feels like a sauce that you try to put on everything.
Yeah,
Let's put AI on everything. So
yeah,
I think we'll get into a certain level, into a plateau where, hey, this is how we can use it, and I think it's going to be more similar to the way that we already use, because you cannot give like too much power to the internet, to everyone, uh, into your system. Like let me explain. So imagine that I allow my customers to interact with AI, right? So if if I'm a bank, right, the client cannot go there and ask the AI for a different account. So those sorts of constraints, maybe we cannot like afford to have like a very powerful AI that can do all those things and grant to the client, because we might have a major security breach or something that is
Yep.
really dangerous to the company. So I'm more inclined to think that it's going to be an amazing internal product like the intranet and everything. So in the sandbox of the company and the constraints of the company, I think we'll have like amazing potential. I think if we go to the customer, we'll have like so much potential on the chat, right? Uh, Basically chatting with the client, see what, but there will be constraints on what the AI can do, right? We cannot grant everything that AI can do. We
Yep.
cannot grant the AI to do that,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So I'm inclined to think that we're still gonna see amazing things like AGF, like they say, like they will have that in a couple of years or months, and it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing to be alive in such an era. I think AI definitely come to stay, but I'm not an early adopter guy by nature. So I think it's yet to be discovered. It's like we're not gonna use for everything, even though right now it feels like we experimenting with all those things. But I think it's going to be very specific, and it won't replace all the developers, I think, because you still, on the data perspective, right? Giving my data engineering perspective, AI, I mean, you probably spend too much time trying to come up with a prompt that gives you the right result, instead of having a guy who actually write the rules that exist into that company, into the data sets and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
feel kind of we are in the way of discovering that.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Um, kind of going back to, like data architecture and processing time and all that kind of stuff, kind of just going back to some of the, still like the transformative on the digital side. Um, you said we're about maybe 20% of the way there, if that, feeling like a little bit more generous on that side. As you're seeing companies still shifting, right, in that transformation process, um, how are companies, or how are you thinking about this, doing it more in an efficient way today than it was, doing it 10 years ago in that transformative process and then building out the infrastructure? What are some of the things that you've noticed, again, based on your experience, firsthand, that is now, much more faster, much more, I think optimal in terms of like what you're setting up from the first time and the first go around versus what it was probably before, where it was like, probably a lot more general in terms of like what that setup was before you could then go deeper and then see what the productivity or the usage was going to be out of it, and then having to refine it over time. How are you able to diagnose some of those things a little bit earlier now?
Yeah, so what I can say is that, like I mentioned, before you had to go through all this process from wherever the company was. So you need access to a computer and whatnot. So now everything is in the internet, available to you at the speed that is incredible. Of course, we have better infrastructure on the telecommunications wise. So I think we are on now. We have satellites, internet like all over the world. Starlink, one example, right? So I think we are more connected than ever, and now the developer is empowered to do stuff, do infrastructure, right? So that's one major shift that I see. You don't have to wait the components to arrive, the network being the cable come to your table. basically this is already, we are super connected right now. So this is a shift that happened like more than 10 years ago. Right now we have super fast connections. We have the cloud, and we have multiple clouds. Of course, we can spin up in different clouds at the speed of the code, right? So you have Terraform for doing that. And in the data side, of course, you have Snowflake, you have other competitors that you can do the same thing. You can just go their code. If you have an account, then you can code your database. And we did that for one of the clients. We had to create like multiple databases. And that usually took a lot of time to do that. You needed to ask someone in the company to do that stuff. And right now it's more centered around the DevOps figure. So all the infrastructure is more concentrated in the DevOps. So there's a lot of power invested in the DevOps figure right now. And this guy is empowering the companies like, hey, how many machines do you need? How many instances you need? Maybe you need, I need to scale up or down. And that's an amazing thing that I see. You don't need to have everything running 100% of the time. You can also have your database ready and just for one job, just for one thing, and then you don't need that database anymore. Or if you have like your data inside storage, which is another topic that I want to explain. So now you have columnar formats basically competing their way into the data side because they're pretty cheap, right? And pretty efficient and fast. Of course, you don't get all the security benefits that you have with a standard database, but I mean, it's pretty awesome that you can have like a very cheap database at the cost of storage. You don't need to pay for a mega database if you don't need that, right? So it's basically a design decision that you need to make, so architecture decision, sorry. So maybe you can go with a flat file format. Maybe you need to go with a more secure data warehouse environment with roles and that stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I think from the company's like perspective, it's balancing the cost of one versus the other, and in addition to like scalability, right? Is there from again maybe wearing that DevOps hat, like how do you think about making that balance or even making that recommendation to an organization? I mean, are you looking at what are you looking at to assess, what is the best viable path there, whether it's one of those, flatline databases or something that has to utilize the computing of something more complex?
I think every company is different, but most of the time, when we go to a company, they already have like a database, a
Got it.
pre-existing database that they want to scale, or maybe they want a data warehouse. So this is most of the scenarios that I see. It's like they are running X amount of legacy systems, and now they want to put it all together inside a data warehouse, right?
Got
And from my perspective, I think the key to all that is how much data do you have that you need to migrate into one place, and how do you need it? I'll explain one example that we had. It's like with this client, we started with an IoT project, right? But it quickly became bigger as the client saw the opportunity and the need, of course, that increased the cadence of the updates. So it's hard as a consultancy company to have a broader spectrum, a whole idea of what the solution should be. So if you're internal, if you're part of the company, probably it's easier to see the pain points, where you have to implement, how do you have to implement solution, what is the best mode. So as a consultancy, sometimes you're not allowed to see all those areas
Yeah.
where you could choose the right solution. And what I can explain is that the project that we started was just for IoT and quickly became like so much bigger, right? So as opposed to replicating just one data, one specific set of data, it became like replicating 20 databases, right? And then after replicating, it became like, so we don't want hourly batches. We need real time. And those challenges, of course, uh, they raise the bar on what you have to develop, and the architecture has to be different, of course. So I think if it's not like the client will come up to you and say, hey, I want to build a real pipeline and replicate 20, because they like to go slow and put one step at a time in the water. But I think it's crucial to have some sort of immersion so you can see the pain points, or you can see where you're moving towards, right? Into the solution wise and architecture wise, right? So, but now it's so fast. I mean, you can change you can change the infrastructure so fast. Like we changed multiple times in this project, and it was awesome. At the end, we ended up developing a pretty fast CDC replication solution for the client, and we were replicating basically 18 databases in real time. So under 1 minute, of course, under 1 minute window. But yeah.
Yeah, very cool. As we're running it down on time here, I mean, I guess like, we covered a few topics. We covered gold rush of AI, how it might still be a little bit further away from the impact on data infrastructures from what we're thinking in terms of still trying to figure out what the practical use cases will be from that. And then just talking about, current digital transformation still being not quite where we have full mass market adoption yet, and we're still maybe still only 20% of the way there. Um, so a lot of moving parts, right? Like in today's, just from a data perspective. And so, is there any other things that we didn't cover, of waves of things that you feel like also will um, impact your world of things as well as just the wider world of data?
Yeah, just there's one product that I love, and I'll explain why. And I think it's a major, it's a game changer in the industry because it's so simple, which is DBT, right?
Mm,
DBT comes, so let me explain how I see the evolution of and why DBT is so important. Because basically DBT solves two major problems from a company, which is the data silos. You have SQL files scattered all over the place. So you have all this knowledge uh, across your company, whether it is in the IT department, business department, and whatnot. So I think DBT kind of solves this issue of documenting the transformations and also being able to tie together all those pieces, right, inside a project. I mean, it's not a silver bullet, but I think DBT is amazing because it does that, and because it's basically running inside your database. The principle of DBT is running inside your database. So you're not doing ETL. The major shift is from ETL into ELT. Basically, ELT requires you to preload the data in raw format. And it's also, we used to do those things. It used to be good practice. Whenever I was building ETLs back in like 2010, we used to build a lot of ETL pipelines in data stage, but the best ones were the ones that we used the transformation inside the database because they were so much faster. You didn't have the IO, you didn't have all those back and forth with the data, right? So I think the beauty of DBT is because it's so simple. to use. It basically creates programmatic interface on top of your SQL. So I think it's amazing, an amazing tool, right, to use. I think we used a lot of DBT with Snowflake, and Snowflake is makes a lot of those data movements, all those engineering aspects of the database so much easy. And 2 years ago, when I first came in contact with Snowflake, I had like this kind of love at first sight. When I start doing some database creation, table creation, I saw those amazing features that I didn't see in other databases. Like you can create um, you can create a table and you can swap the table. You can swap schemas. You can swap database. So I found that amazing because those were the tricks that you had to have under your belt. Of course, at the expense of tons of working hours that you had to do it yourself. You had to rename tables. You had to create tables and rename them in order to swap them in other systems, right? So Snowflake was basically delivering that to you in so much convenient way to use. So that's when I fall in love with the pair. Like if you're a data engineer, of course, you be more stick to the stack that I'm talking. Like if you're a data engineer, you'll probably be doing a lot of transformation in DBT, and you be using Snowflake until a certain point, right? But there are other stuff that you probably want to use Terraform, right? Maybe create databases. I think Terraform has a component of not restricting your models like DBT do. So you can basically replicate a lot of stuff. Maybe I can create 1,000 databases using the same script. Basically, you can do that. Of course, you can do that with DBT as well. Can program a macro, but I mean, maybe you have to pick one or the other, because if you're DevOps and if you're programming the infrastructure, that will be the department of the infrastructure. So you be doing that more with the tools. You're probably not going to use DBT to create that infrastructure, right? You're probably going to stick with the stack that the DevOps have, like Terraform and other stuff. But if you are on the data engineer side, you probably go with DBT and solve your problems with DBT. And those are amazing additions that I see right now. A lot of companies are not using yet DBT, even though they don't even know all those features, right? They don't even know that they have this. Maybe they are not aware that this is a big issue of not having the SQL file somewhere. So, for instance, I had some companies that a lot of the SQL files were somewhere, maybe inside the ETL job transformation. But what I think is great of DBT is like you have it properly documented, and you can properly tie the process together in a way that it's not just SQL scattered around. I mean, you can follow a sequence of transformations, and you can tune that. So I think we're still like we want AI, but we have so much to do, like so much housekeeping to do, and we can do with those tools, and they're simple, and you will gain the benefit of having the SQL somewhere, not with someone, right? And that's one things that I find amazing, the simplicity and how it solves so many problems, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Like that was a great last piece of advice to end it on, in terms of what we might be seeing in terms of like a new thematic trend popping up. I wanted to say just thanks so much for taking the time today and sharing your wealth of knowledge, and getting deeper into the weeds around this topic. And so I know you're super busy, but this was, I think, very insightful.
Appreciate it, Chris. It's really
Awesome. Thank
nice
you.
to speak to you.